On April 26, 2003, Aaron Ralston, an experienced outdoorsman, was exploring Blue John Canyon in Utah when his life took a dramatic turn. Confident in his abilities and familiar with the terrain, he thought it would be just another routine solo adventure. But fate had other plans.
My name's Aaron Ralston. My parents are Donna and Larry Ralston of Englewood, Colorado.
Ralston had arrived a day earlier, on April 25th, with the intention of spending some time navigating the area's narrow slot canyons, some of which were as deep as 30 meters and barely wider than a person. Since he expected the trip to be short and uneventful, he didn't inform anyone of his destination or how long he planned to be gone. That night, he parked his truck and slept inside it, wanting an early start the following morning. By 9:15 a.m. on April 26th, he set off on his mountain bike toward Blue John Canyon. He only carried the essentials: a small amount of food, a single bottle of water, and minimal gear, intending to return by evening. After biking for a while, he reached the start of the canyon, secured his bike, and continued his trek on foot. Around 2:45 p.m., approximately 5 hours into his hike, disaster struck. While descending a narrow section of the canyon, he stepped on a dislodged boulder. The rock shifted, sending him tumbling down a short drop, about 2 feet. But as he fell, his right arm became wedged between the canyon wall and an 800-pound rock that had crashed down with him. Panic set in as he struggled to free himself, but the rock wouldn't budge. Once he regained some composure, Ralston began assessing his dire situation. He was trapped roughly 30 meters below the surface. No one knew where he was, so it would be days before anyone noticed he was missing. He had no cell signal or way to call for help. The nearest paved road was 20 miles away. He realized that survival meant enduring long enough for a possible rescue, if one came at all. Adding to the crisis, he had severely limited supplies: 2 burritos, a bottle of water, and a few candy bars. The most pressing issue, however, was his immobilized arm. He had only a cheap multi-tool with a dull blade, which he considered using to chip away at the boulder. The other options were just as grim: either find a way to shift the massive rock on his own, or, as a last resort, amputate his trapped arm. That night, Ralston began the painstaking task of chiseling away at the boulder, using his knife in hopes of slowly freeing his arm. Bit by bit, he tried to carve away the stone that held him prisoner, beginning a fight for survival that would test the very limits of human endurance. After spending roughly 15 hours trying to carve away at the boulder with his dull pocket knife, Ralston came to a grim realization. It was hopeless. The rock was simply too massive, and his tool too inadequate. Shifting gears, he turned to his second potential solution: trying to lift or move the boulder. Using a length of rope he had with him, Ralston fashioned a crude pulley system, hoping to generate enough force with his one free arm. But even with all his strength and ingenuity, the 800-pound rock didn't budge. He remained firmly trapped. Meanwhile, the toll on his body was becoming more severe. Dehydration was setting in, causing his body temperature to fluctuate wildly. His strength was waning, and the lack of food and water was beginning to show. Despair started creeping in. He began filming messages to his loved ones with his camcorder, documenting what he believed could be his final hours.
Finds this, please make an attempt to get it to them. Be sure of it. I would appreciate it.
The thought of amputating his own arm, an idea that had been circling his mind for some time, was beginning to feel like his only chance. The next morning, After much deliberation, Ralston gathered the contents of his small multi-tool and attempted to begin the unthinkable. He used the small knife to pierce the skin of his arm, but barely managed to draw blood. The blade was simply too dull. Another night passed, cold, restless, filled with anxiety and the constant awareness of time slipping away. Determined to take more decisive action, Ralston changed his tactic. Rather than slicing in a back-and-forth motion, he began stabbing into his arm, hoping for quicker progress. But as soon as he hit bone, reality struck. His blade couldn't cut through it. The metal was too weak, the edge too blunt. He paused the attempt once again, mentally and physically exhausted. By Wednesday, Ralston had spent 5 days in the canyon. His food was long gone, and his water had run dry. In desperation, he resorted to drinking his own urine to stay alive, facing the very real possibility that no one would come for him in time. He began to confront death. He recorded farewell messages for his family and friends, offering his final thoughts and last wishes. Much of the day was spent in a daze, caught between daydreams and hallucinations. He later described seeing his loved ones appear before him in the canyon, and even having a vivid vision of a future child, a life he hadn't yet lived. Then came Thursday, the 6th day. Ralston had reached his physical and mental breaking point. But with that came clarity. He had a breakthrough. Instead of trying to cut through the bones, what if he broke them? The way his arm was wedged allowed him to generate enough leverage to possibly snap the bones himself.
It came to me, this epiphany that I could break the bones, because my arm was caught so tightly that I could torque myself.
And that's exactly what he did. Gritting his teeth, he twisted his body with everything he had, eventually snapping both the radius and ulna in his right arm. The sound was sickening, but it meant the impossible was now possible. With the bones broken, he used the dull blade to saw through the muscle, tendons, and finally the arteries, completing the self-amputation. The entire process took over an hour. Once free, Ralston stumbled backward and collapsed against the canyon wall, alive, but forever changed. This was the defining moment for Aaron Ralston, what he would later call a rebirth, but one where he emerged with the mind and memories of a grown man.
And then, boom, and I wasn't even attached anymore, and I fell down like this, and I was free.
Free, but far from safe. Now that he was no longer pinned, the next challenge began: getting out alive. Weak, injured, and rapidly losing blood from the self-amputation, Ralston had to find his way back through the unforgiving terrain of Blue John Canyon. His truck was still 8 miles away, and between him and it stood rock walls, cliffs, and searing heat. Somehow, he found the strength to climb out of the narrow canyon and rappel down a 65-foot rock face, all with one arm. He then began trekking through the desert, covering over 6 miles under the scorching Utah sun. Eventually, his luck turned. A family hiking in the area came across him, sunburnt, bloodied, and barely conscious. They quickly contacted emergency services. 4 hours after he had freed himself, a rescue helicopter arrived. Medics rushed him to safety just in time. Had it taken any longer, doctors confirmed, he likely would have bled to death. Aaron Ralston survived one of the most extraordinary ordeals ever endured in the wilderness. But he didn't just survive, he transformed. Today, he lives a life shaped by that experience. He's become a motivational speaker, inspiring countless people with his story of resilience and survival. He also continues his work as an engineer and is the author of the best-selling autobiography, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, where he details his experience in raw, gripping detail. His incredible story went on to capture the world's attention, eventually becoming the inspiration for the Academy Award-nominated film 127 Hours, starring James Franco. What began as a routine solo hike became one of the most gripping survival stories in modern history, one that reminds us of the power of will, the strength of the human spirit, and what a person is capable of when they're faced with impossible odds. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring real-life stories. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to light. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.